Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books and our tribute to Center Foundry. Before we start the program, we have to give away a piece of glass from that's been upstairs. How many of you entered that raffle? Okay, none of you are going to win. Just saying. The winner's going to be... All right, so Julia she's going to draw.
Is there a Belinda here?
See, I told you, sorry.
All right.
Just Belinda?
Just Belinda.
All right, we shall call Belinda. Congratulations, you've won the glass. Belinda, we have no last name. But we do have a phone number, so we'll take care of that. How many people are here who worked at Center Foundry over the years? Okay. The next thing we'd like to do is take a group picture of the people who worked at Center Foundry, if you wouldn't mind coming up here on the stage. Come on now. Nanette will take the picture. Come on up. Yeah, move forward out of the... Hey, gentlemen, my mom says you need to move that way, so the light doesn't ruin the picture. There. Okay, I feel like some people didn't get in the picture. I wonder. Okay, thanks. So I'll just announce a couple things that are upcoming. On Thursday, we have our 6th Vietnam War class for People's University this Thursday at 7 p.m. There are 8 total classes. And then on Monday, actually we have a Monday special program with the Wheeling Symphony, Words and Music, a Creative Dialogue. It's sort of a workshop, they're calling it. Dr. Christina Fizonic and Dr. Matthew Harder will lead attendees on exploration of how listening to music inspires imagination. And then on Tuesday at noon, we will talk about the Lincoln School with Daryl Clausell, longtime president of the Wheeling branch of the NAACP. And so that's our regular scheduled Lunch with Books program. Now today we have, obviously, what we're calling Remembering Center Foundry. I do not remember Center Foundry, except as someone who drove by and saw this a lot. I went up yesterday and took this picture because this is what is emblazed on my brain when I think of Center Foundry. It's that corrugated metal on the outside, and so I took some pictures with the rust and all that. And I use it as a slide background. But I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of sun-bleached and hospital blue-green, maybe, with rust. Anyway, but the reason we're here, this business was founded in 1840. I'm going to give you a brief sort of history based on the history that was written about it, that we received here in the archives. And then I want the people who are here who work there to fill in the gaps by actually explaining the process and maybe telling some stories. So it's kind of your program more than mine, because I'm not an expert. But I'll set up the stage for you. So who was president in 1840? Well, it was this guy. Yeah, Martin Van Buren. And then there's this lady. Why do I show her picture? Because Center Foundry at that time was located in Center Wheeling, thus the center, which they kept when they moved to Warwood. And this is who? Rebecca Harding at the time. She was a 9-year-old girl living, when it was founded, nearby. And she wrote famously Life in the Iron Mills, which is based on her experience seeing those men walking to work and et cetera. So it was originally founded as Baggs Foundry, and I've already lost my place in my notes. Just 1 second here. James and H. Andrew Baggs erected a foundry on the corner of John and 4th Streets, which is 16th and Chaplin, just out here, is where it was originally located, with 10 employees, and they produced small iron castings using sand molds. We'll get to that more about that later, to make things like stoves and boiler grates. And the name Center Foundry, as you see here in this advertisement, was used as early as 1853. And here's a Sanborn map that kind of shows you where it was located when they moved it to 20th Street. Here's a close-up. So it was near where the Main Street Bank is now, sort of in their parking lot. You can see on that the word cupola. This will come back later. We'll talk more about that. But cupola's plural. There are 2 of them there, Tom. This is 1850 or 1880. Here's a look at where it's located with a modern map imposed over the area. And Rebecca Davis, we found out from a postcard that we posted online that this was her house growing up. So this is the Aryan Hall, which is on the corner there across from Main Street Bank. It's still there. And that's the old Presbyterian church, which collapsed. And there's her house. So she lived in proximity, if you go back, to like less than a block away from the foundry. So indeed, she may have been writing about these guys. This is a Thomas Pollock Anschluss painting called The Ironworkers' Noontime that he made upon visiting Wheeling. And so these are ironworkers, and this is how she described them. You may pick the Welsh immigrants, Cornish miners, out of the throng passing the windows any day. They're a trifle more filthy, their muscles are not so brawny, they stoop more. They are drunk, they neither yell nor shout nor stagger, but skulk along like beaten hounds. That's from her book. And then if you take a look at this picture, well, this painting is it's called The Iron Rolling Mill by Adolf Menzel. And just listen to this. This is from Harding's book as well, describing the mills. The mills for rolling iron are simply immense tent-like roofs covering acres of ground, open on every side. Beneath these roofs, Deborah looked in on a city of fires that burned hot and fiercely in the night. Fire in every horrible form, pits of flame waving in the wind, liquid metals flaming, writhing in tortuous streams through the sand, wide cauldrons filled with boiling fire, over which bent ghastly wretches, stirring the strange brew, and through all, crowds of half-clad men looking like revengeful ghosts in the red light, horrified, throwing masses of glittering fire. It was like a street in hell. So that's what the iron mill was like back in the late 19th century. Does any of that sound familiar, guys? A little, yeah. I remember driving by and seeing the fire through that corrugated wall and wondering what was going on in there. This is the Center Foundry on Main Street, on 20th Street in Maine. And this is the interior of it. And I just wanted to show you some of the pictures of these. That's a chipper. What does a chipper do? Yeah, back in the day, he's using a hammer and a chisel, and then you would go to a pneumatic tool later. Here's one of the old crews at, I think this is at the Main Street plant. I'm not positive. Is anyone? Yeah. Okay. Now this plant, we know for a fact that it made cannonballs for the Civil War, that it made parts for the suspension bridge. It may have made parts, we haven't confirmed this yet, but for the Panama Canal. So we're talking an historic business here in Wheeling that has closed recently. We had an opportunity, that is the library archives, to have a tour, and Frank couldn't make it today, who was our tour guide, unfortunately. I was hoping he'd be here to help with some of this, but I'll do the best I can. We do have a video that's online that was made by Wheeling Heritage. We played it in our exhibit upstairs, but you can go on YouTube and see it. There was a lot of stuff already gone by the time we got in there. So, in 1855, the company was purchased by brothers Alexander and Charles Cecil, who moved to what is now 2011 Main Street, which I've shown you, and adopted the name Center Foundry in 1860 officially. After the Civil War, J.R. McCourtney and Edwin Hobbs were running things. At that point, they were casting iron and heavy machinery manufactured for rolling and cut nail mills like LaBelle, as well as parts and engines for steamboats. They use patterns like some of the ones you see up here, typically made of wood, packed into an iron box known as a drag. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. Filled with special hardening silica, green sand, and clay. Please jump in if you hear me say something in error. Even when the pattern was removed, a void remained in the sand that was then fired and hardened using a blackening agent. The cupola furnace at the time was used to melt the iron. And there was, at that time, a master molder named William McElroy, who led the effort to make large castings for Crescent Ironworks, as well as to cast the iron house fronts and gates. By 1881, an English immigrant pattern maker, this is him, named John Young, had acquired a controlling interest in the company. He died in 1892, but the Young family continued to own the company until 1979, which is when Dyson Kistner Moran took over. During the latter 19th century, they continued making nail machines, castings, rolls, nail plate shear, shifting to molds and castings of 500 pounds and heavier after the turn of the century. You can see here's an advertisement for some of the things they made. The name was changed to Center Foundry and Machine Company, incorporated in 1902. So you see on these advertisements cast iron house fronts, ornamental fencing, window lintels and sills, ore pulverizers, muck bar and nail plate shears, gearing pulleys, and all kinds of machinery castings. In 1923, the foundry moved from Main Street to its 11-acre site in South Warwood, nevertheless retaining the name Center Foundry. So I just want to show you some of these giant castings from that period. Here's an ingot mold. And I guess that's another chipper, but I'm not sure what, is that an ingot mold as well, guys? This, I don't know what that is, but some kind of giant casting. Here's an early picture of the Warwood plant taken from the river or from across the river, and you can see on the hillside there the housing, the company housing for the coal mine, the Costanzo coal mine that was there. That's a very rare photograph. You don't often see the housing that way, and here's an illustration that was made from that same image. Here's a picture of Warwood in 1955, I think it was, and coming from the other direction. And the crew sitting with on top of some of the ingot molds there. Another picture of the crew. I'm not sure if this is Warwood or the Main Street. This looks like Warwood to me. Okay. And this is the interior of the plant in Warwood in the 60s, I believe. Here's another, this is a caustic pot. What's a caustic pot for?
I don't know if it's a slag pot or a pot that they would dump more, they would take more liquid magma and dump it into something else with different type of mold possibly. Bill might be able to answer that one, can you, Bill?
Yeah, a lot of this was, so just take your best guess. Here's something else. Another, they're calling it a bed plate. Not sure if anyone knows what that is exactly. But you can see that it's on a train car getting loaded up.
I don't even know what the jungle gym were to the right of this thing for. I've never seen anything like that up there either. So like the thing you climb on as kids?
Yeah, it looks like a coal conveyor almost, but
We did a lot of stuff at coal mines, so that's possible.
and a coal mine was,
Patterns and stuff like that.
yeah. Another large piece of something. It's a slag pot.
That's probably 165 cubic feet or bigger, maybe even bigger than that. Inside, that's probably 400 tall, huh?
Julie, would you mind bringing the microphone up here? Well, the reason. Now you're going to have to, because if people are watching online, they can't hear what you're saying if you don't have a microphone. Yeah. So I'm going to have her bring that out. I don't care who uses it, but if you have something to say. Yeah, that's why we're here. We want to hear about it. Over here, Julia, please. Just leave it at that table for now. Thanks.
Is it on? Is it on? Okay.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to say whisper something and then.
So what did you say about this?
That is probably like a 400 cubic foot pot that the other steel mills would have like a 300-ton ladle, and then they would take all their garbage off the top of it, and then they would pick it up by those big circles and then just dump it out, and it'd come out as one solid blob of gob.
How about this? Any ideas on what that is?
Okay, to the left is flas, is what the wooden patterns that you see up front here would technically go in, but these are for much bigger ingot molds. The flas to the left, it looks like I was thrown apart. They're probably for a 26-inch mold by 85-inch mold, and it's about 80 inches tall was the side. So that's even bigger than that dimensions. But that's what those look like. Those, to the things on the right are what goes inside the things to the left. Those are what the finished product, but the sand is inside the things on the left.
Okay,
And
so
then they
the,
push the wooden pattern out of that, and then they finish it, then they dump the iron inside of that thing on the left.
the thing
And it
on the
comes
left,
out, and when it finishes out, it's the thing on the right. If
Okay.
that's understandable.
yeah, I think I got you. And those large things that are stacked, those are the molds? Yeah?
Yes. Underneath of it, there's, see, the flask, back in the day, when they finished pouring, before they shook them out, when we took the casting out of the drag, they took them drags apart and let the sand fall out of it, and then they would beat them around on a crane or on a pole. They would jack up and down because that sand was so hard. I was the last one to actually play that banjo and shovel them things, but that's another story. But that's how you used to chip out the sand with a rod, a chisel, and then it would just fall in. They'd pick it up, dump it out, and then you would dig in it some more and dump it out till it was clean. So you could get it up to the chipping shed, and then they would finish chipping, cleaning it up to ship.
And your name, sir, just for posterity?
Brad Kent. I was the one in the video online that didn't want to be on video.
Yeah, I remember.
Now you got me down here talking.
It only took us a year, we got you here.
They used to ship it in. If you could go to the one of the mill in the 60s, I could show, they used to bring in rail cars right there. Right there, about where that crane is, by the looks of it, looks like where they would bring in the sand and they would dump it out in the rail cars or take it out in grab buckets over to a mill that just would be underneath that crane, and it would run it up into tanks. And along that side was where they would do the processing part of it. And then they would take it over there to about just shy of where the glare is, and they'd start shoveling it in to the thing sitting there on top of the right. See, the bottom pieces on the right are the small jobs, which would be like a flat pan or something, not, and the pot would go in them flats too. But as you can see, they would just bring the sand in from, I don't know where they brought it in
So they
from.
didn't source that locally, the sand was imported in from somewhere.
That, to my knowledge, yeah. See, like at the end, when I was there, they would bring in a dump truck and dump it out a load at a time. And then they would run it through that system, because I was right at the process of changing over from ram sand to no bake.
So the sand had certain properties in the day, I mean, it wasn't just any sand, but I mean, it was something
Right.
special about it, or the mixture of it, was.
In the beginning, that's what he did. Yeah, there's fire. At the end, we mixed acid and a binder together to make the sand harden quicker. And it was very hard. You could, hard, yeah. Kind of a glue. The glue would be, and then the acid would make the binder harden quicker. So we always had to, in the summertime. Right. It would harden the sand. It would just mix, we'd had a machine that when Brad was talking about, that was the beginning, I think. But toward the end, the sand was pumped into large containers, sand tanks. And then we would shoot that sand with air across to where we needed it. It came down into a machine. And then that machine was an auger that would spin around. And the acid and the binder would mix with the sand as it was coming down the chute. And it would go into the flask around the wooden pattern. And then it would harden. It would harden in an hour.
What made this area a good spot for a foundry? I mean, why was a foundry here in 1840?
All the steel mills. You got to figure Benwood was, Wheeling Pit or whatever was in the early 1900s. I found pieces for Follansbee Brothers that are clear up in, that was out of Toronto before they were even in Follansbee, which was eventually named the town after them. But, I mean, there was stuff like that for pipe and, I mean, it was all the coal mines, all the steel mill, Pittsburgh.
Was it the
But-
coal for the furnaces, or was it the river?
Well, the coal, we never had, our coal was turned into coke to melt. We had no coal. So you would get it from, I don't know where they got from Wheeling Pit back in them days, or I wouldn't think not. I don't know where they got the coke from. Yeah, I mean, that's, like you said, they'd bring in coke cars and they'd bring in little pig iron too to melt. They didn't take, we used to put 10,000 charges in. I don't know if there's any pig iron. I'll let you go on. Yeah, there you go.
Here's a picture of the pig iron.
Yeah, they take that magnet right there and come down there and stick it on top of that roof, and then they would push it into the cubelos, and they would mix limestone, coke, and what am I missing, Bill? So anything else? Coke, limestone, and just gas, and they'd light it off? Well, pig iron. Yeah.
Julie, maybe we need the small mic too.
Right, he just said so much coke and that, it just take time, once they melt it off, so much process over and over, till they fill it up, and then they would light it off, and it would burn down, and
Here's another picture of the pig iron. Does anyone know why they called it pig iron?
come out of a mold like that, to my knowledge. They made little molds that just were pig molds that they dump iron into, and then sell them off like that.
Yeah, it resembled suckling pigs with a sow. That's what I understand. And you can see the cameraman's shadow in this picture. What's this? Do you think it's
It looks like the inside of a pot.
Another
Pattern,
plastic
maybe,
pot.
because, I'd say it's a pattern, because of the little, the notches on the top, the white marks.
Yeah.
Those are probably old, where they kept the gate, so when it would pour all the way to the top, it would feed the iron back in with the shrinkage, so it would have the extra. And I'm thinking that's where they left the, pieces of, like toilet paper, or, just to make the hole so the iron could go up through. Piece of pipe or something. It'd be the risers, yeah. The marks from the risers from beating the sand around them, where there was no sand.
okay? We have some more pictures later that we'll get comment on. I'll just go back to the history for a minute. By 1927, the company employed 85 men. They made 20 tons of castings per year. By 1928, their employment had increased to 100, and by 1938, 150, making 800 train car loads of cast iron pots, stamping and drawing dies, and machinery castings per year. So it got to be a pretty big operation. In 1952, the president was Karen T. Young, the first and only female president of Center Foundry. And in 1964, the Foundry acquired Washington Mold Machine and Foundry of Washington, Pennsylvania. And in 1967, Wadsworth Foundry of Wadsworth, Ohio. Here's a couple more pictures. I want to get to the, there's a very large ingot mold, yeah. And some of the brochure they produced that talked about some of these things they made. And here's the new logo once they acquired those properties I told you about. The CWW Group increased and diversified the product portfolio, and they made ingot molds, massive gray iron castings of up to 70 tons, slag pots, blast furnace runners, and they had this newsletter. Yet by 1979, both of the subsidiaries had closed, largely because they could not compete based on new environmental standards. You had a lab on your property. Was that lab, how long was that in operation? I mean, when did it close?
Probably since the beginning, I mean.
No, that's been closed since, that's been closed probably since, what, 80s, Bill? The lab, it probably, 80,
Closed in the 80s?
that's what I thought. It was still in operation when I started. I started in 81.
So they would do experiments with the sand and things like that to figure out,
They would test it. They would
Yeah.
test the sand and everything, yes.
okay. There's, in the archive now, we have a lot of pictures of the lab and other places, but the interior of the lab. And there they are working on some experiments. And I like this one because the guy's got a cigarette and he's,
Is
You
that
know that guy?
Cadillac, Bill? Bill, is that Cadillac in that
No.
picture?
I don't know who it is.
Okay.
he's got a
There
cigarette
was more
pipe.
alcohol than there was cigarettes back in them days, I can tell you that.
What appears to
don't
be
doubt that.
flammable stuff. So now I'm going to show some pictures of the actual, pouring iron and stuff. Maybe you can comment on these. First, maybe talk about the silvers. I think the outfit you had to wear. Tom, you wore it, did you not?
When did they start wearing silvers?
'Cause we-
Oh, I'd say probably late 80s, 90s, late 80s, 90s. When I started there, all we wore was greens and nothing over his face,
So you
at
had
least for me.
you had no protection against the heat.
No, and I got scars from head to toe.
So you have iron that's what, 2,300 degrees? Is that right?
Yeah, we pour about 2,300. Yeah, that's about right. Yep. No, just green. They were fire retardant, is what I was told. That was after I caught on fire because I had washed them and there was holes and they frayed a little bit and I caught on fire and I raised some hell, I think, to Bill, and Bill said, they're not fireproof, they're fire retardant.
They're for layman
Yeah.
So what's this guy doing here? This is a ladle man?
Yeah, he's pouring iron into a mold right there. Oh, he's skimming.
skimming.
Yeah, he's skimming the slag off the top. The slag is like almost like lava, like molten rock. It's all impurities, and you got to get a wooden stick that has a paddle on the end, and you just pull it off.
Yeah.
And then you can tell when it's clear.
Yeah, we did rescue one of these silver outfits. We had it in the exhibit. It's going to be in the archive.
Never wore one.
It was pretty small. I don't think I could have worn it. This is the last pour, as I understand it, at the Foundry before it closed.
Yeah, it's a ladleman there. That's like a 25-ton ladle.
25 tons?
25-ton holds 50,000 pounds. Yeah.
And he's pouring that into the, what's that thing called again, the flask?
That's the drag.
The drag.
Those are the drags right
Yeah, you're pouring into the mold itself.
If you
No.
go back one picture, you can see an empty mold right there to the bottom left.
Yeah.
There's one they're probably scraping the slag off to pour that ladle there. If you look to the thing on the right, it's like kind of in front of the skimmer. That's what they would pour the iron into, the cup.
Yeah.
And then the iron comes up, and as it gets to the full layer to the left of what that cup's on, where the duct tape is, it'll fill up to there, and then they'll stop pouring it.
Anyone in the audience have a question? Gene?
So the stuff that he's skimming off is the stuff that's not good, is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
And then what happened to that stuff?
It actually went to 24th Street up in Warwood.
I played in
up
that
by the
stuff.
playground, and we would dump there. I mean, when I was a kid, it was a big valley there, and now it's all filled in.
Every kid from Warwood remembers that
Yeah, they
dump.
cut the hell out of you.
We'll get
didn't they?
more on that in a minute. But one thing I wanted to mention was that Center Foundry made the iron trim that you see on the restored Custom House, Western Independence Hall. It could not be reproduced in the same way it was originally created in Italy with skilled craftsmen creating patterns in wood, the old-fashioned way. In this version, they use plastic, is what I read in the newspaper. It required a much smaller scale, more intricate type of casting than Center Foundry at that point was accustomed to, but the adaptations they made offered learning opportunities. And then after the iron trim was installed, the entire door was painted for the wood trim to make it look wooden. This guy, you may have seen in Steubenville, he was made at Center Foundry, right? This is called the Ohio Valley Steelworker, and it's outside the library up in Steubenville. Was anyone here involved in that?
I unveiled it.
You unveiled it? You want to tell us about that?
Well, there was the Greek guy. I just remember his name was Dimitri. And he's the one that designed that. He's the one that sculpted, made the pattern for it, sculpted the pattern. And it took quite a while to make. And we ended up, it took a while to make, and then we ended up pouring it. Turned out halfway decent, but it took a lot of hours there was a few guys that were welding on it every day, and they volunteered a lot of their time to it. John and Sam and Abe Morris was their names. They were from Steubenville, and they went and set it up in Steubenville right across that bridge there at first. Yeah, and that's where we unveiled it at. But they had it covered for a long time while those guys did all the touch-ups, and Dimitri was very
The artist's name?
anal.
Demetrius Akis was the artist's name, yeah. So that's a nice tribute to steelworkers.
But it really is. That looks like the real deal there.
Of course, it's in Steubenville, though. We need something here, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. This is when they were going to make the new heavyweight graphite molds. Some of the advertisements. We have a little ingot mold up in the exhibit. Some of the exhibit's still up there. You can see it if you're interested. But this is just a promotional material. And this was another thing that happened at Center Foundry that a lot of people don't know about. Does anyone recognize what's happening here?
That's a furnace.
Yeah.
That furnace, it can hold anywhere from, usually when we start a brand new furnace, which is all new lining in it, it would hold 60,000 pounds of iron. And as it wore out, once it got up to about 100,000 pounds, you know you were getting pretty thin. And then you would put this gunning material in. But right here, it looks like they just put a charge in.
Let me give you a hint. Ohio Valley Drug Task Force.
Oh yeah. They would the FBI they would bring in all the drugs and.
When you went up on a roof.
Yeah. I was up sucking it up in the fan.
So
Just kidding.
they burned all kinds of stuff in there, including weapons, I understand it. It was so hot it could burn anything.
Oh yeah.
And so they put the Paul Hankish files after the prosecution was over, were put in there, were put in a,
I believe
Furnace?
so. Yes.
so there you go. Destruction of evidence on a massive scale. Another fun thing, this is what you see there in the background is the Warwood Trolley Barn, which is became part of Center Foundry. And really what a trolley is the thing on top of the streetcar that gets the electricity from the wire so the streetcar moves, yeah? So here's another picture of the barn. If you drive by, that's still there. You can see it has Center Foundry on it. But inside, back in the day, it was a place where they fixed these streetcars. And some of those, when we did our tours, you could still see the tracks in there. Here's what it looks like now.
That's me on the
I think
left.
that's you, right? Yeah. So we went in there and I asked, is there anything left of the streetcar days? And they said, no, there's nothing left. But I saw up on the roof, but it had been there like 100 years, was this little sign that we took down, they took down for me, and it says pulled down trolley. So that thing that was on top of the car had to be pulled down so they could back the car into the barn. And that's what the sign was there for. So that sign's upstairs. So you never know what you'll find. But here is a picture back in the day of the dump right next to our playground. You see some kids using the playground, but what actually happened was you'd start there and then go over to the dump to play. And so I found this article which describes how Center Foundry gave some things to build this 24th Street playground. And then later in the article it said, right here, there will be fewer soil clothes for the Petrini, Panis, Swan, Pavlik, Duffy, DeSantis, and Provenzano kids. Happier mothers and more civic-minded fathers. I didn't even know. All these years later, I found that my name was in there, and so this confirms the fact that I was raised in that dump. And even though they built the playground, we still played in the dump. So, the dump kids, yeah. And so they had the sand after it was used to make the iron, whatever they were making. They would dump it in there, and so there were big blocks of hardened sand that we would take and make things out of them and play in there. And there were the slag was in there. It was cool. It was the coolest place on earth. Yes, sir, Tom. Please interrupt me.
My grandfather, my great-grandfather, who didn't die till I was about 13 years old, lived on 19th Street, actually worked the dump. They would get out of the sand, there was clamps and wedges and things they called geigers, which were just L pieces of steel, yeah, that they stuck into the sand to hold the sand when they didn't use the glue and the acid. Anyway, he lived on 19th Street and would walk to the 24th Street dump. And his name was Edward Hoffman, and my Uncle Bob, who was my grandfather's brother, lived right on the avenue, Bob Hoffman, and they worked that dump as long as I can remember. And I remember that they made a pretty good living. They sold the wedges back maybe for a dime, and maybe they sold the geigers, the L pieces of iron. They would sell those back for a penny, and maybe the clamps they would get a quarter or something. And of course, the price went over the year, but I know that my great grandfather, they made a pretty good living. They would go through the sand and they would pile them up, and those big slag pots that you see that they were scraping the impurities off of, they would actually take them to the dump and they would dump them. And he had an old pickup truck, four-wheel drive pickup truck, that they would wrap a chain around and they would drag it up. And I have the wedges that they used to break it up so they could get it back again. I don't know how they did that, but I have a pretty long history up there. You know, I would go up there when I was a little, maybe 6 or 7, you know, and I wouldn't understand what they were doing, but I do have a fond memory of my grandfather and my Uncle Bob working that dump, and I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We have a couple of comments.
Okay.
Where it says Ballard, who is the Ballard, do you know?
He
Which
was
one?
like he was the park guy for the city, I think, or
That
recreation.
wasn't Carl Ballard, was it? Or Tom Ballard? Was he the mayor then?
Tom was the mayor.
Well, he was the mayor at one point, but at this point, he
would be
was,
before.
I'm pretty sure, like the recreation manager or whatever. Yes, okay, there you go, confirmed. I have it somewhere, but I can't find it.
While Sean's looking for that, I have a question about the sand. Was any of the sand reused, or was all of it dumped? Was it a one-use sand?
No, we would bring new sand in every so often because it would only take so many pours before its strength would be weak and wouldn't hold up the product. But we had machines, back in the early days, they just reclaimed it into a hole, run it through a vibrator and back up into those big tanks you see on the left-hand side going up Route 2. Those tanks held the original sand in it. And then they would just wet it down and reuse it then. And then as they switched over to the no-bake, they would reclaim it, they would shake it out, and it'd fall into a certain area, and they would just put it into a hopper, and it would run back up into the tanks that you see in the north end, on the back side of the plant when you drive by. That's where the second system of sand went.
Yeah, I have it here. Tom Ballard, head of the Wheeling Recreation Department. So this would have been 1972. So I put this on Facebook about, the dump. And I got a bunch of comments on the Warwood Memories page from people like Maureen Kerrigan, Joan's daughter, who said, "We were all apparently dump kids. And how did we never question that our supply of sand blocks kept getting replenished?" And we called the creek, which was orange, that ran through there, the Bloody Bones. And so someone said, what Warwood kid didn't have the orange stains from Bloody Bones on their tube socks growing up? Yeah, that's true. You'd run around in the creek. It was just a mess, but we loved it. It was fun. You could play Planet of the Apes or whatever you needed. Any kind of apocalyptic landscape there it was. All right, let's get to this. These guys. Tom, you want to tell us about these? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, these were the old cubulos. There were 3 of them. We were talking about the coke and how the iron was melted years ago. I want to see one of these cubulos saved. The middle one is there's another one on the right-hand side there. Yes. I think the middle one could be saved. It's the smallest of the 3. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, if you can see the bottom of these doors, you can't really see them. They might have already been gone here. To the left? Oh, yes, yeah. Okay, can't see them. These doors they were sold for scrap. And my concern is that that's what they're going to do with the rest of these. They're going to scrap them. Chuck Dito is the president up there. Rob Dyson owns the building. I'd like to see the city put a little pressure on them. I mean, this is history right here. I mean, I don't know what to say. Who knows whether these are moved from center wheeling or not? We have no idea. Maybe they were used to make parts of the suspension bridge or the door at the Independence Hall.
There's the interior,
Yeah.
it looks like.
And I know it's not going to be a cheap thing to do, to move one of these cupolas, but, I mean, who knows how, in my lifetime, I was there 23 years, and there was a gentleman that got electrocuted and died. I mean, there's people that literally put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears at that foundry. Like Greg, I have scars all over my body from, I've had 2 elbow surgeries. I have severe arthritis in my back. All these guys that work at the foundry know how hard of a job it was. But we don't have anything in Wheeling that represents Blonde Knox and Wheeling Machine and LaBelle Nail. We had a lot of industry here, and it's gone, and that's the only thing we have. And I would really like to see the city and people like yourselves put a pressure on the mayor and Center Foundry itself to save one of those cupolas. They've already taken the doors off.
The mayor supports this effort. We, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, but you do support the effort. And this is a picture from Station Square in Pittsburgh of the Clinton blast furnace that they preserved. If you go up there, you can see it. We could do something similar with one of these cupolas, I think. We all think. And I think a lot of the, yes, thanks, Tom. People would support this. And yeah, the big thing would be getting it out of there. But I think I'm just going to politely ask Mr. Dyson if he'll give it to us and see what happens. And that's one place to start. But anyway, if you want to support this effort, let me know. We're making a list. And this is what the cupolas were replaced with. This is a electric furnace, 2 electric furnaces with capacity of 55 tons that they used, and this was more in keeping with the Clean Air Act, is basically why. Because the old cupolas would make a lot of ash, is it fair to say, that would fall on the town of Warwood.
I think one of these guys will know. They did fire one of those cupolas up, but I don't know the story behind that. You know?
Yeah, Frank told the story. I wish he was here.
Yeah, I was there when we fired it up.
Go ahead, tell the story.
Can you go back?
Yep.
To the cupola?
This one? This one?
Yeah, go to that one. What they would do, they would put the coke and that in there, and then they'd have fire blowing in the back of it. This here went to a room that blew air. So you would have the air and fire going at the same time. You had to get the coke going before you got the air going. But once you put that blower on, you're melting iron. And once you get started, there's no stopping it. I mean, you're doing it till the end of the day. Like Tom said, there's doors at the end, at the bottom. And once you get that out of there, there's where the iron comes out, obviously, right here. And once you get going, you just don't, you can't stop. And, you know, I got to see it run twice. And
So the electric furnace broke down and you
that's
had...
when the real men were working.
So you only work 2 days in your life.
Yeah.
And tell the people your name, sir.
I'm Greg Dush.
All right. This is a good Warwood name.
Oh, it's a Warwood name.
Yes, sir.
There was 11 of us.
So anyway, that's the electric furnace. There's an advertisement for it. This is what our exhibit looked like when it was in full. I had to take it down for the glass exhibit, and but it was it was probably one of my favorites. And this part of it is still there. This part of it is still there with the trolley thing. Okay, so that's really all I have. Does anyone have anything to say from the Center Foundry people about the closing or anything else? You're sad about it?
I'll just take a quick comment to say the amount of history that was thrown out of, I don't know, you don't seem to have any pictures of the pattern shop I didn't see in the video. I know in the video they have the pattern shop where I'm cleaning out the, I've thrown away, well, I found things. I found a lot of stuff from each steel mill around here, Wheeling Pit, Weirden, none of all the weird stuff was like really too big to keep. I did find stuff from in our little section, like he said, we made parts for the suspension bridge. They say cannonball, but I found a fireplace fixin' and a back piece for Hubbard, Chester Hubbard. I found a light pole that they would put a light pole in for J.B. Chambers. That's some of the history. I found a mold that I'm gonna for Mark's Toys. That was a grate for Mark's Toy, and I also found a steamboat grate. It looks like about a half moon for a steam shovel. Just to relate on some of the things that you brought up earlier.
Yeah, and if you go online to our website, you can find all the pictures that we took of the pattern shop and other places, and some videos that Frank gave us on our YouTube page. If you're interested in learning more, but at least we got a few things, not much, but we do have the collection of photographs that the Foundry kept, and blueprints for ingots and things like that, and some of these patterns that were saved. Anyone else, or any questions?
Yeah, I like the idea of saving as much as we can here. We've lost everything. People come to Wheeling, they don't see anything from the mills or the old B&O Railroad where I grew up in Benwood. So I think it's an excellent idea to save that furnace, and I think that would complement the new visitor center. If you put that on the ground like that one they have in Pittsburgh, that would really fit in, you know, because there's so many people in the country that have relatives or descendants that worked in the mills and the foundries. I think that would be a big tourist draw along with the new visitor center. You know, that's something you're not going to find anymore.
So we do have a LaBelle nail machine in Independence Hall, but that's really about it in terms of industry. And this place was industry. That was our economy.
I don't know whether it's a question or a comment, but it seems that sand was a very important part of the work at Center Foundry, just as sand was an extremely important part of the glass industry in Wheeling. Is there any way that they could both be used somehow and reused?
I don't know if there's any way we could recycle the sand anymore or not. I mean, the dump's full of it. If there's ever a place to go get it, that would be the place that you could get both types of sand. The clay sand's probably at the bottom. It's probably, I don't know, I've only been to the dump once, so I don't know how deep it is, but yeah.
Sean, I just want to say thanks to Sean for his continued leadership, not only on Center Foundry, but so many other facets of our history, Sean, and these marvelous programs every Tuesday. If you're here for the first time, think about coming back because this happens often. And Wheeling is such a historical city. We all know that. We take it for granted. But I think you're right. We need to preserve everything we can. We need to look around right now and try to preserve. And thank you, all the veterans of Center Foundry. They're walking history. We need to get some recordings and things that are said there. But the special thing, all the people in this room today, we need to be advocates for history. It's one of our most important things. And if you don't know where you've been, it's hard to know where you're going. And so it's very, very important. But Sean, a very special thank you because he's been working on this Center Foundry preservation for a long time. And I will tell you flat out, this opportunity passed. So thank all of you because you're part of this too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I had the opportunity to work at the Visitor Center for a number of years, and I can say people do come to Wheeling because of history, because of family. Unfortunately, they come across I-70 here at the Northern Panhandle, and they're through it before they know it. But they have said to me, you know, we've come through here so many times, and we said we're going to stop there one day. So with things from the Foundry, the waterfront, all of these things are a draw for people to come because I'm surprised at the number of people here. I know Lunch with Books is a good turnout, but I was like, how many people really care about that place that a lot of people don't know about or ever heard? Oh, that's where that is. You know, and Sean, I know you do a wonderful job on everything, and now that Denny's mayor, he could help, and hopefully everyone here in the room will assist you with getting that cupola from Mr. Dyson.
We're going to do what we can. We're going to try.
When did the last Foundry fire go out? When did the Foundry or steel business
The
end
last
here?
pour, you mean, for us?
When
There-
the
there's
when the
still-
last door closed, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, well, we made an announcement like on like September 2nd or 3rd. And then I think of 23, and we might have poured 1 or 2 days after the announcement. Before we dumped the iron out on that Friday, I think we still had a couple products ready to be made, to be poured, and we dumped them out. So I would say September 3rd of 2023 was the last time we produced anything. Now, there's still one more foundry in America, and that's up above East Liverpool. They're the ones that bought us out. Elwood City, yeah, is the last foundry in the country. Far as making ingot molds. Now, you could find somebody that make paint pipe drains, and I know my cousin actually lines the furnaces, and in Alabama, they have a foundry that makes fire hydrants. So, you know, there's all kind of foundries out there still, but there's just one that produces the stuff that we produce. Big stuff, right.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for sharing. And if you ever want to do an oral history and come tell us more stories, we do that. We'll record it. Just let us know. Love to have it in the archive. Thank you all for coming today. And goodbye, Center Foundry.